Chloe's life had always been a series of battles, and she had fought each one with unwavering determination. A single mother to her 6-year-old son, Lucas, Chloe's entire world revolved around him. But lately, her strength had been tested in ways she could never have imagined. Every day was a constant struggle. Unpaid bills piling up, the fridge nearly empty, and the agonizing choice between keeping the electricity on or putting food on the table. Nights were the hardest, as Chloe lay awake, holding back tears, wondering how much longer she could keep going. But Lucas's innocent smile and boundless energy reminded her of why she couldn't give up. She was all he had, and no matter how difficult things got, she was determined to provide him with a better future. And then, one morning, something extraordinary happened, something that seemed almost too good to be true. As Chloe sat in her tiny, dimly lit kitchen, staring at a nearly empty plate of stale bread, her eyes landed on a piece of paper her neighbor had slipped under the door. She picked it up with trembling hands, the words jumping off the page like a lifeline. Private caregiver for high-end residents, demanding work, excellent salary, seeking discretion and commitment. Her heart raced as she read the ad again and again, her mind flooded with possibilities. This wasn't just a job, it was a chance to give Lucas the life he deserved. A better school, a warm house with space for him to play, and the peace of mind that came with not having to choose between necessities anymore. But as much as the salary tempted her, the word demanding loomed over her thoughts like a shadow. Could someone like her, with no fancy qualifications and a life full of struggles, even be considered for a role like this? Could she handle whatever challenges might come with it? Doubts crept into her mind, but Chloe quickly pushed them aside. She had no choice. This could be the turning point she had prayed for, the moment that changed everything. Taking a deep breath, she resolved to give it a try. What she didn't know was that this decision would take her on a journey she could never have anticipated, filled with unexpected twists, life-changing challenges, and an opportunity to transform not just her own life, but someone else's too. The next morning, Chloe stood before the massive iron gates of the mansion, her breath catching at the sight before her. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, grand, almost otherworldly. The pristine garden stretched endlessly, with perfectly manicured hedges and vibrant flowers that seemed too perfect to be real. The towering mansion itself gleamed in the morning light, its sheer size and elegance making Chloe feel small and out of place. She took a deep breath, clutching her simple handbag tightly as she tried to summon every ounce of confidence she had left. This was it, the start of a new chapter, one that could either bring her salvation or challenge her in ways she wasn't ready for. As she approached the heavy front doors, they swung open, and a woman with a cold, calculated demeanor greeted her. Lucy, the housekeeper, had a polite but distant smile that barely touched her eyes. "You must be Chloe," she said briskly, motioning for her to follow. Lucy's tone was efficient, almost detached, and it did little to ease Chloe's nerves. As they walked through the silent hallways, the grandeur of the mansion continued to overwhelm her. High ceilings, ornate chandeliers, and walls adorned with art she couldn't begin to name surrounded her. But the warmth she'd hoped to find in such a beautiful home was entirely absent. The air felt heavy, the kind of silence that carried secrets. Lucy finally stopped at a large wooden door and opened it, stepping aside to let Chloe in. Sitting behind an imposing desk was Arthur Foster, the man Chloe would be working for. He was nothing like she had imagined. Dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, Arthur's presence was both commanding and intimidating. But what struck Chloe the most were his eyes. Sharp, cold, and deeply analytical, as if he could see through every facade and every flaw. The wheelchair he sat in didn't detract from his authority. If anything, it made him seem even more unapproachable, as though life's hardships had hardened him into someone who trusted no one. "Are you the candidate?" Arthur asked without preamble, his voice curt and to the point. Khloe swallowed hard and nodded, trying to appear more confident than she felt. Yes, sir. I'm Khloe. Arthur tilted his head slightly, studying her as if she were a puzzle to be solved. Why do you want this job? The question, simple as it was, carried a weight that caught Khloe off guard. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling slightly as she answered. I'm a single mother, and I want to provide a better life for my son. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. For a moment, there was only silence. Arthur's gaze didn't waver, and Khloe felt as though she were being judged on more than just her words. Then, with a brief nod, he spoke again. Start tomorrow. Don't disappoint me. His tone was final, leaving no room for questions or conversation. As Lucy escorted her out, Khloe felt a mix of relief and anxiety. She had the job, but the man she would be working for was unlike anyone she had ever met. That night, as she tucked Lucas into bed, she couldn't shake the memory of Arthur's piercing gaze or his stern warning. This job could change everything for her and Lucas. But deep down, Khloe couldn't help but feel that this mansion held more challenges and secrets than she was prepared for. Khloe's first day on the job began with quiet determination and an undercurrent of anxiety. Lucy had briefed her on Arthur's strict routines and specific needs, but nothing could prepare her for the vulnerability of her role. Her main responsibility? Assisting Arthur with his most personal tasks, including bathing and dressing. As Khloe entered the master bathroom, the sterile environment reflected Arthur's rigid personality. Everything meticulously organized, from the assistive rails to the high-end products neatly lined up on the counter. It was a world so different from her own, yet she knew she had no choice but to adapt. When Arthur wheeled into the room, his presence was commanding despite his physical limitations. Let's get started. I don't have all day, he said curtly, not even glancing at her. His tone left no room for mistakes, and Khloe quickly moved to adjust the shower bench for him. But as she watched him grip the rails tightly, transferring himself to the bench with visible effort, Khloe noticed something unexpected. His hands bore scars, deep and jagged, as if they told a story of pain he refused to speak of. Arthur, sensing her hesitation, broke the silence. Don't treat me like an invalid, he snapped, his voice cold but defensive. Khloe steadied herself, her tone calm but firm. I'm just here to make sure you're safe, Mr. Foster. Nothing more. He scoffed, but said nothing else, allowing her to assist him in silence. As she gently soaped his shoulders, she noticed a long scar running down his back, a mark of past trauma that spoke volumes. She wanted to ask, to understand, but something in his demeanor told her it was a topic he guarded fiercely. Over the next few days, Khloe became accustomed to the silence that often filled the mansion, broken only by Arthur's sharp instructions or Lucy's occasional presence. Arthur's behavior was a mix of stoicism and subtle hostility. He was never outright rude, but his words often carried a biting edge. Why are you still here? He asked one day, his voice almost challenging. Khloe met his gaze, unwavering. Because I believe in earning what I need for my son's future. I won't leave just because it's difficult. For a moment, Arthur's cold eyes softened, but the moment passed quickly, and he turned his wheelchair away. As Khloe began to navigate her duties, another presence in the mansion made itself known. Evelyn. Arthur's relative was everything Khloe wasn't. Elegant, poised, and exuding an air of superiority. The first time they met, Evelyn walked into the dining room with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. So, you're the new caregiver, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. Yes, I'm Khloe, she replied politely, trying to mask her discomfort. Evelyn's gaze lingered on her for a moment before she turned to Arthur. I hope you don't give her too much trouble, Arthur. She looks delicate. Evelyn's words stung, but Khloe kept her composure, knowing she couldn't afford to let anyone question her resolve. Over time, it became clear that Evelyn wasn't just a passive observer in the household. She was manipulative, always looking for ways to undermine Khloe. She would make veiled comments about Khloe's lack of experience or subtly question her ability to handle Arthur's demanding personality. "You know," Evelyn said one afternoon, her voice low and conspiratorial, "people like you usually don't last long in places like this. It's just too much for them." Khloe refused to rise to the bait, but the tension was palpable. She began to see the cracks in Evelyn's polished exterior, her need for control and her jealousy over Khloe's growing presence in Arthur's life. Khloe also noticed how Arthur's demeanor changed around Evelyn. His already cold exterior hardened further, his jaw tightening whenever Evelyn entered the room. It was clear their relationship was fraught with unspoken resentment, and Khloe began to suspect that Evelyn's influence was a large part of the emotional walls Arthur had built around himself. Despite the challenges, Khloe persisted. She focused on doing her job with care and dignity, slowly earning small moments of trust from Arthur. One day, as she adjusted his wheelchair after a bath, he surprised her with a quiet remark. "You seem different from the others," he said, almost to himself. Khloe paused, unsure how to respond. "I'm just here to do my best, Mr. Foster," she replied softly. Arthur didn't say anything else, but Khloe couldn't help feeling that, for the first time, the ice between them had begun to crack. Yet, as the days passed, it became clear that the mansion was a battlefield, not just for Arthur's physical recovery, but for trust, control, and the fragile hope of something more. And in the shadows, Evelyn waited, her schemes and threats looming like a storm Khloe knew she would have to face. One afternoon, as Khloe was tidying the kitchen, she heard the unmistakable sound of tiny footsteps echoing through the mansion's grand halls. She turned quickly, her heart skipping a beat, and there he was. Lucas, her little bundle of energy, clutching a rolled-up drawing in his small hands. "Mommy," he exclaimed, running toward her with a grin that could light up the darkest room. Khloe crouched down, her arms open wide, pulling him into a tight hug. "Lucas, what are you doing here? Did Anna bring you?" she asked, a mix of joy and worry in her voice. "I wanted to see you," Lucas replied simply, as though his presence alone explained everything. Before Khloe could lead Lucas back to the kitchen, a shadow fell across the hallway. Arthur had appeared, wheeling himself into view, his sharp gaze fixed on the unexpected visitor. Lucas, unbothered by the imposing figure in the wheelchair, tilted his head curiously. "Are you the man in the chair?" he asked, his innocent tone cutting through the mansion's usual tension. For a moment, Arthur was taken aback. No one had ever addressed him so plainly. "I suppose I am," he replied, his voice quieter than usual. Lucas stepped forward, extending his rolled-up drawing. "I made this for Mommy, but I think you might like it too." Khloe's breath caught as she reached out to stop him, but Arthur raised a hand, signaling her to let the moment play out. He took the drawing, unrolling it carefully. It was simple. Vibrant colors scrawled across the page depicting Khloe, Lucas, and a man in a wheelchair. Arthur stared at it for a moment, the corners of his mouth twitching upward into what could almost be called a smile. "You like to draw?" he asked, his tone softer now. Lucas nodded enthusiastically. "When I grow up, I want to be an artist. Mommy says I'm very creative." Arthur nodded, his gaze lingering on the drawing. It's good to be creative. Most people lose that as they grow older. The room fell quiet for a moment, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Khloe watched the exchange in silence, her heart full. This was the first time she had seen Arthur let his guard down, even just a little. After Lucas was sent home, Khloe found Arthur in his library, the drawing still resting on the table beside him. He stared at it as though it held some deep secret. "Your son is interesting," he said when Khloe entered the room. His voice was calm, but carried a hint of something she hadn't heard before: admiration. "He's my strength," she replied simply. "Everything I do is for him." Arthur nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "You're different, Khloe," he said after a pause. "Most people are here because they have to be. But you're here because you care. That's rare." Khloe felt her cheeks flush but held his gaze. Caring doesn't cost anything, and sometimes it's all we have. For the first time, Arthur seemed to truly see her, not as an employee, but as a person with a depth of strength and resilience he hadn't encountered in years. The walls he had built around himself didn't come down that day, but they cracked, just a little, as Lucas's innocent joy and Khloe's quiet determination began to chip away at the bitterness Arthur had carried for so long. Evelyn's presence in the mansion became more threatening, with veiled insults escalating to anonymous notes warning Khloe to leave. Despite the pressure, Khloe remained steadfast, determined to protect her role and provide for Lucas. Meanwhile, Arthur discovered Evelyn's betrayal, a forged scheme to siphon funds from his accounts. Furious but resolute, he confronted her, exposing her lies and demanding her departure. Evelyn's threats and protests fell on deaf ears, and she left the mansion in disgrace. With Evelyn gone, a new energy filled the house. Arthur, inspired by Khloe's belief in him, began dedicating himself to physical therapy. During a session, he pushed himself harder than ever, managing to hold himself upright for several seconds. It was a breakthrough, symbolizing his emotional and physical progress. "It's a start," he said, a rare smile on his face. With Khloe's unwavering support, Arthur's transformation was underway, and the mansion, once a place of tension, now felt like a space for renewal and hope. The day of Arthur's breakthrough came quietly, without fanfare. In the therapy room, the usual calm was replaced with a focused determination. Khloe stood beside him, ready to assist as he gripped the parallel bars, his knuckles white with effort. "Today, I'm going to do it," he said, his voice steady yet full of resolve. Khloe nodded, her voice calm but encouraging. "One step at a time, sir. You've got this." Arthur began to pull himself upright, his muscles trembling with strain but fueled by an inner strength that had grown with each passing day. Slowly, he lifted one foot and placed it forward. Then, with a deep breath, he moved the other. It was just a few steps, but they were his, strong, determined, and full of meaning. "You did it!" Khloe exclaimed, tears welling up in her eyes. Arthur, breathless but smiling, looked at her. "No, we did it," he said, his gratitude clear. "I never would have believed this was possible without you." In that moment, their bond solidified. Arthur saw Khloe not just as his caregiver, but as someone who had reignited his hope and shown him that life was still worth fighting for. For Khloe, watching Arthur reclaim his independence was proof that her unwavering belief in him had made a difference. Their journey had been challenging, but together, they had transformed the impossible into reality. As the sun set over the mansion, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, Arthur sat with Khloe in the garden, the place that had come to symbolize their shared journey. Turning to her, his voice steady yet full of emotion, he said, "Khloe, you've brought light into my life when I thought it was lost forever. You've given me hope, strength, and a reason to move forward. I don't want to imagine this life without you. Will you stay forever, not just as my assistant, but as my wife?" Khloe's eyes filled with tears as she nodded, unable to find the words to express her joy. "Yes," she whispered, her heart full. Lucas, watching from nearby, ran to them, his laughter ringing out as he threw his arms around them both. The mansion, once cold and silent, now echoed with the sounds of love and laughter. It had become a home, a place where a broken man, a resilient woman, and a joyful child had found not only a new beginning, but a future built on love, trust, and perseverance. A family united at last. As the sun set, Arthur turned to Khloe and said, "You've brought light into my life. Will you stay, not just as my assistant, but as my wife?" With tears of joy, Khloe whispered, "Yes," as Lucas ran to embrace them both. The mansion, once cold and silent, was now filled with love, laughter, and hope, a family united at last. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring tales. Your support means everything.